Well, joining us now to discuss issues around electoral reforms ahead of the next election, which is scheduled for 2027 in Nigeria, especially on the appointment of the new INEC chairman. We're joined by Lanre Arogundade. He's the Executive Director, International Press Center, the IPC. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, as we talk about those reforms, much of the debate seems to center on the next INEC chairman. And at that event that held earlier today, we just heard your soundbite. You talked about the true independence of the electoral body, which is named Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. And, you know, there's been that skepticism, despite or regardless of who's in charge as president, there's always that skepticism of transparency, fairness, accountability around who heads that body. Why is that so? And how can we get it right?
Well, you know, there's a Yoruba proverb that if you continue to have lice on your head or in your hair, you continue to have blood on your fingertips. I think it just shows that we're not yet there when we're talking about the processes. The successes that we've recorded as far as election management in Nigeria is concerned so far has largely been due to the character of the individuals in charge, who on their own believe that they need to carry out some level of integrity in the management of the process, introduce measures that can make the process much more transparent. So we can say that we have that trend from Jega to the current INEC chairman.
Yeah.
But we're looking at the process itself, because it's about the institution. So one of the proposals we're putting forward by way of what we call the Citizens Memorandum, for example, is that the criteria for appointing the chairman of INEC should be expanded and clearly spelled out. Because what we have now is just a person of integrity, and that integrity would always be defined by whoever is the incumbent president. But when you look at elections now, it involves technology, it involves management of resources, materials, deployment, and so on. So it will be good to have a much more broad-based criteria for us to determine. Then that process itself should not just be limited to the president or the presidency alone and the National Assembly. There are interest groups, the political parties themselves, the civil society organizations, the media, women organizations. The current trend is that the president only more or less gets the approval of the National Council of States, which we cannot say is representative of the entire society, because these are just former heads of state, some of whom had actually in the past.
But it goes to the National Assembly, which is representative of the people.
Yeah, it goes to the National Assembly, but don't forget that the National Assembly, because of political something, have politicians there who, even if they have their way, will probably have an electoral act or electoral process that favors them. That is why we're saying that it is not just about the presidency, the Council of State, and the National Assembly, but also about the rest of the society, some of which I've already mentioned. They must have a say. As a matter of fact, the public must have a say. The reason why the judiciary in South Africa is very strong is that even the process of appointing judges in South Africa involves the people who have a say. They bring information out about those who become judges, and anybody could come out based on what they know of that person and raise that objection. So we're calling for expansion of criteria. Now there's the dimension of the national commissioners. So you have a chairman of INEC who in reality does not have much control over the national commissioner, because the national commissioners are appointed by the president and the National Assembly. The chairman of the commission does not even have a say. So you could actually have conflicts of interest. It's just like the security sector, where you say state governors are chief security officers, whereas they don't have a say on who becomes the commissioner of police in their states. So these are some of the anomalies in the process that we are saying should be corrected, so that through the office of the chairman of INEC, we can begin to see stronger elements of independence and ultimately impartiality in the management of the electoral process.
Well, some say the National Assembly should be vested with the power to appoint INEC chairman. And then we recall Justice Uwe's report, where he actually, that report recommends that the NJC or another independent body should handle such appointments. But is it really the fact that the president appoints the INEC chair? Is that what is the fundamental problem, or the failure of oversight institutions to do their job, to ensure that INEC, whether they are appointed by the president or whoever, actually is, oversighted to ensure that they do what is required of them?
Well, so when you say INEC should be oversighted, in terms of what? Because again, part of the problem is that too many responsibilities are placed on INEC in terms of election management. INEC is supposed to do voter education. INEC is supposed to register political parties. INEC is supposed to prosecute electoral offenders, even when INEC does not have its own police or its own, DSS. These are part of the problem. So in terms of ensuring that the institution is more effective, part of the proposal is also that there should be unbundling of INEC itself. Right. When it comes to voter education, we're saying let INEC share that responsibility with the National Orientation Agency. When it comes to offenses, let there be a political offenses commission. Now, part of the fear of the people really is that are we now again creating, more, bureaucracies? But there are solutions that you have to apply based on the exigencies of the times. And then we're also saying let there be a separate commission that registers political parties so that INEC could actually face the challenge of managing and conducting elections. We believe that if these steps are taken, then it will be better. And then the question of oversight will not now just be on INEC. You now have oversight on the Political Offences Commission, which will be at the level of the judiciary. You have oversight when it comes to civic and voter education and other forms of oversight that is required to make it effective. We can't leave this thing entirely to the national.
We've been rounded up very quickly. Honestly, the fact that 2027 general election will actually be managed by relatively new management. You mentioned, the national commissioners earlier. Chairman is exiting in November. 5 national commissioners in 2026. Another 5 exiting on the eve of 2027 election. Is that something to even be worried about?
It's to be worried about, and that is also because there are no timelines when it comes to these appointments. It is not tenure. It's more or less left at the discretion of the president. So they come in at different times and they leave at different times, and that even affects the capacity of whoever is the chairman to manage the process, because sometimes they don't have national commissioners. So all these things need to be tidied up, and our fear now is that we're running against time.
That's
because
the big question,
if some of these amendments require amending the constitution, some requires amending the electoral act, and all this would have to be concluded at least by March next year for those new legislations to take effect against 2027 elections.
Unfortunately, what we don't also have on the news tonight is time to take more. Mr. Lanre Arogundade, Executive Director, International Press Center, thank you so much for joining us on the news tonight.